My name is Jan Kardys, and I'm a literary agent. I have my own agency, Blackhawk Literary Agency. Prior to that, I worked for 10 major publishers, and if you want to know who, they're on the back of a brochure that I gave you that says Unicorn for Writers. But I started out in editorial, worked for 8 editors, took editing courses, worked at Lippincott and Crowell, which is a trade publisher. I did subsidiary rights, permissions, contracts, book club agreements. Subsidiary rights, does anyone know what those rights are? Sub-rights are, let's pretend this book for a second is a hardcover book. The publisher wants to try to get as much money as they can for your book. So they're going to try to sell book club rights, or paperback rights, or magazine rights, or foreign rights, or audio rights, or ebook rights. So I did that too, so I have a lot of experience. I worked at St. Martin's Press doing sub-rights and foreign rights. Macmillan for 10 years. I was head of their contracts department, so school, college, trade, and children's books. And then I worked at Warner Books and Little Brown, Condé Nast for a year, and then took a break from publishing and worked at Google in 2003 through 2006. And then I went back into publishing. I missed it too much. I went back to Scholastic, because I've worked at Scholastic twice. And then I started my own literary agency when I moved to Reading from Scarsdale, New York. And I also started a huge writers' conference called Unicorn Writers' Conference, which I'm going to pass out the brochure for it. I don't have a lot of copies to give you, so basically what I did was, you can just pass that around. I decided, I'm really a teacher at heart. My first job was teaching English. So I have this incredible urge to share my knowledge. And that's why I like to do these library events. Because as an agent, seeing your query letter, which is your letter about your book, you're trying to pitch us, I've seen so many mistakes. Now, another odd thing about my background is I was married to a literary agent for 20 years who ran the William Morris Agency, which you probably know is one of the largest. And his name is Robert Gottlieb. His first big client was Tom Clancy. Wow. So he's had megastars. And my son, now Robert started in 2000 his own agency called Trident Media Group. And if anyone really knows about agents, that's a big agency. And my son, I gave you a handout, which is a day in the life of a New York City literary agent. And my son, Mark, was interviewed. But you can go online and type in Grim Tidings, G-R-I-M, Tidings, and then look up Mark Gottlieb, and you'll see 3 or 4 podcasts. But what's interesting about it, he does a lot of fantasy as well as other genres. He's interviewed, and a lot of questions are asked that writers need to know. So it's a really good tool if you go on YouTube, type in Grim Tidings, Mark Gottlieb. You'll listen to some really good podcasts, and they'll give you some good information. I'm going to go over the basics with you. If there's anybody who doesn't have handouts, they're on the chairs here. And make sure you put your email address. I won't share it when I send it out. It's blind CC. It's going to go to you. So anyway, this handout that I put on your chair is a day in the life of the New York agent. And that will be helpful for you. I also put together another, because remember I was an English teacher originally, I put together components of a novel. How many people are writing a novel? Okay, so you have to know this stuff inside and out. And today, it's not like I started in publishing in 1976. It's not like in the olden days, with Michener, which you could go on and on forever. Today, your first page has to hook us. You have to get us right into the main character's mind, or not necessarily the main character, into a scene where we're emotionally hooked. Too many times I've seen authors spend too much time on setting, and they start with a storm or a fire or something. Well, we're bored. Why are we going to relate to that? Think about the basic emotions, love, hate, jealousy. If you hook us emotionally with your characters, we will turn page 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. I'll give you an example of something that happened to me about 3 or 4 months ago. I put together for my church, congregational church, where I teach Sunday school on Sunday to first and second graders for fun. And I decided to help writers at our church fair. So I went on Facebook and LinkedIn and through some meetup groups, and I said, if you donate $25 to this church for our church fair, I will let you mail your books to me. You're going to have to pay for the postage back if I don't sell them, but I will sell them for you at whatever price you tell me. So guess what happened? People from all over the United States started writing to me and sending me checks. And some of them actually drove 5 hours to show up with their books. So one of the people that contacted me was this guy, David Salskin, who's been traditionally published. His agent died. He got a really good advance for his first book. His agent died, so then he went to all these small presses after that without an agent. And he pretty much gave up trying to get an agent for 10 years. But he continued to publish. He became a speaker at Thriller Fest. He's a thriller author. And he said, Jan, can I call you up and talk to you about this book event? I have 10 books to sell. So I knew what he was really trying to do. He obviously wants an agent. So I spoke to him, and then he said, Jan, could I send you my book? It's a thriller. Now, I have really, a men's thriller. What do I know about men's thriller? I don't think my son would probably be better, or my ex-husband. But I said, sure, print it out. Don't email it to me. It's easier for me to read it physically. Send it to me. Well, guess what happened? It came the next day, express mail. I opened it up. I started reading it, and I couldn't stop. I literally didn't do the dishes. I didn't make food. I just read it until I couldn't stop reading it. I was so, I saw a few flaws in it, but they were pretty minor. And then, obviously, I said, David, I would love to represent you. And I'm very close to sending his book out in 3 weeks. One of the other things I put together for you that will be very helpful is I put together a sort of a checklist. I don't know if I gave it to you. It's a blue sheet. Maybe you don't have it. I'll pass it out. I didn't. If you can just pass this out. I put together a checklist for my clients. Now, because I worked inside publishing and I know what they do and they don't do, I put together a list of requirements. You can just pass this back. When I take you on as a client, I will edit your book. I have somebody on my team that will edit. Sure. I will edit your book free of charge. Why? Because I do not want to send out your book with any problems. The characters have to be well developed, complex. The plot has to be right. I don't want 10 subplots where we can't figure anything out. If you've noticed today when you go to the bookstore and you see flaws in books, you've seen mistakes, the reason why is because it's so competitive today in the big publishing houses, they don't have time to edit in the old-fashioned way. When you're an editor, your day starts going to meetings, cover design meeting, editorial meeting. You're sitting there with all the other editors pitching your book. And you're not just pitching it to the publisher, you're pitching it to the salespeople, to the subrights people, the people handling foreign rights, marketing, publicity, all of the and special sales and premium sales. All of these people are sitting, and if you don't have friends in different areas, you're screwed. So it's very political. And then you go out to lunch with agents, or occasionally with your authors. So it's a very intense day. And then answering emails, dealing with contracts, dealing with permissions, dealing with the cover, the production run, how many copies are we going to print. You're dealing with all the things that are involved with producing a book. So do you have time to read manuscripts 9 to 5? No. When you go home after you make dinner, you're reading manuscripts. So the reason why I stress the first page is so important, a lot of times even when you read a book, you start reading a book and you're a little bit bored, but then on page 20 or 30, it starts to pick up, right? The author has suddenly found their voice, but they didn't find it in the first 25, 30 pages. So that's a problem. If you submit your book to an agent and they're not skilled and they don't jump ahead, they might just reject you for that reason. So what I highly recommend you do, and I don't have enough copies for you, but I brought this in. How many people have ever heard of this book, City of Thieves? I don't know if anyone's read it. Okay, David Benioff.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to read the beginning. I'm going to read, someone recommended this book for me, even though this is not something that I probably would be interested in. I couldn't stop reading this book once I got into it. The first page hooked me. So what I want you to spend your time doing, whether you're writing a children's book, young adult, a novel, or even nonfiction, start going to bookstores and libraries. Do not go by the bestseller list. Okay? There's a reason why we'll tell you later. Look at books that really captivate you from page 1. Take notes, study what they've done, ponder what they've done. So let me just read the beginning of this. And some of you will love it and some of you won't. This is a subjective business. My grandfather, the knife fighter, killed 2 Germans before he was 18. Now, isn't that a dynamic first line? Right away, you're thinking about things. You sort of see various pictures, right? I don't remember anyone telling me. It was something I always seemed to know. The way I knew Yankees wore pinstripes for home games and gray for the road. But I wasn't born with the knowledge. Who told me? Not my father, who never shared secrets, or my mother, who shielded away from mentioning the unpleasant, all things bloody, cankerous, or deformed. Not my grandmother, who knew every folk tale from the old country, most of them gruesome, children devoured by wolves, and beyond by witches, but never spoke about the war in my bearing. So I could go on. Basically, I'll send this around for you. This would be a book to study. A lot of times I'll tell writers that are my clients, or I have another company, Unicorn for Writers, where I help writers. I'll say, here, I want you to read Far Pavilion. I want you to read whatever it is I'll tell them to read that's related to their genre. And then they'll read it, and then I'll say, well, what do you think? Oh, yeah, I really enjoyed it. You have to ponder. When I tell you to read a novel or a book, or even a children's book, I want you to take notes. What did you learn? How did the author seduce you into the very first page? Does anyone have questions? Because I know you have tons of questions. We can take a question break. Like, do you want to know about copyrights right away? You're worried about your material?
Who reads the manuscripts then?
The person who reads the manuscripts initially is literary agents. Now, can you get published without an agent? Yes, you can. There are some publishers that will take your manuscript without an agent, and you will find out about that by going through a directory called the Literary Marketplace. You're going to have to look up each publisher, type in the search box, submission guidelines. Do any of the major publishers take you? No, they won't. Why? Because everybody in the United States would be sending in their manuscript to Random House or Simon & Schuster or Hachette, Grand Central Publishing, Little Brown. An agent is sort of a buffer, and they make decisions. They're really the gatekeepers in this industry. They have a tremendous power. When my son was born, we got 250 baby gifts from editors all over New York. So that's how important an agent is for you. They can make or break your life. So, yes.
And agents have specific...
I'm going to tell you what agents do. So what do agents do? The first step is an agent will get a letter from you by email. Some people mail them in. I actually put together for you my submission guidelines, which is on the back. So the first step is there's a directory called the Literary Marketplace, but you can go online to Poets and Writers, and there's a list of agents there. And then you just go on the website and you start reading. What are their submission guidelines? They vary. There's similarities. For example, Laura Blake Peterson, who's a top literary agent at Curtis Brown. Curtis Brown is a very, very good agency. She's worked there all of her life, started as an intern. For her submission guidelines, she'll say, send me a query letter, which a query letter is basically an introduction about your book. It's a summary of your book. It's a pitch. She'll say, send a query letter, but attach your first 50 pages. She's very smart. She doesn't waste time. Because you know what? A lot of times, I won't look at a query letter. I'll look immediately at the opening of a book. And then I'll jump around to the middle, and then I'll jump to the end. But if you don't help me in the first 5-10 pages, it's next. I have some friends that are agents. They're so busy with query letters that they don't have time to even reject you. Now, Laura Blake Peterson says in her submission guidelines that if you don't hear from me within 3 to 4 weeks, you can assume I'm not interested. Okay? So I don't want to get you discouraged, but agents get, like my ex-husband gets like 100,000 query letters a month, exclusively. So do you see how important the query letter is? There are tons of books you can buy on query letters, how to write one. What's your question?
So for somebody like her, would you be looking for an agent? Like if you're going to do a picture book, you're looking for a picture book agent. Right.
But there's directories, Writer's Digest. How many people know about Writer's Digest magazine? Okay.
We get it here at this library.
All right. You should. Okay. I'm going to give you a list when we go through this PowerPoint of some magazines that will really be helpful for you to go to a library if you don't want to spend the money. Writer's Digest magazine, Poets and Writers, and the Writer magazine. Okay. You can get a lot of information on the web. There's another publication which you probably will not be able to get in this library. Librarians, library directors, it's called Publishers Weekly. How many people know about Publishers Weekly? Well, now you do. Okay, that's great. So I'll pass this around. This is something that's circulated inside publishing company, large, I always got a free copy when I was at various publishing houses. It's very expensive for a year, but there's resources of information, and I'll pass this around. I would not recommend you spend money on this. I recommend you go to a library where it's on the shelf and you can read it. Why is this so valuable to librarians and library directors? Because in the back there are reviews. And based on these reviews, they decide what books they're going to buy. Now, sometimes library directors have to buy books they don't want to buy, like some of the best-selling authors that maybe they don't really love, but they have to buy them for you. So there's a limited budget that they have. What does an agent do? I think that's the most important thing to answer those questions. An agent will read your query letter. It's your introduction about your book. Make a decision to ask for the whole manuscript. If we like it, then we'll tell you how we work as an agent. All agents have different ways of working with you. Some won't touch the manuscript at all. They want it perfect. If there's any flaws in it, next. Because too much comes at us every day. What we do is we put together a letter, which is basically your query letter, but in more depth, describing your book. We attach the manuscript, and then we do a spreadsheet of all the editors and publishers that we feel are appropriate for your book, and then we'll send it out. It's all done electronically. The olden days, it was done by mailing manuscripts. It's not done that way anymore. What I do and I put this together for my clients, is I made a checklist. And I'm probably more thorough than most agents. I make you do more things than most agents do, only because I worked inside publishing houses. I saw what was done and what wasn't done. I want the competitive edge, and also working at Google. You know, I've learned a great deal working there. So the first thing is final edited manuscript. If I don't feel the manuscript's good enough, you know, like there'll be a few flaws, like I need a better love scene. I want you to pump it up more. Or you don't have enough drama in this section, draw it out more. I want 2 or 3 pages more. If I have to do major work on your book, I'm not going to take you on as a client. So if you think that an editor in a publishing house is going to do surgery on your book, forget it. They want a book that's in really great shape. So if you're writing a children's book, for example, and I'll pass out a submission that I did, I actually met this woman, her name is Christine, in a library event in Middletown, Connecticut. And I said to the audience, is there anyone here that can pitch their book in 2 minutes or less? Well, only 2 people stood up because they were too nervous. But her book idea was based on truth. She's an ICU nurse and in Bristol, Connecticut. And she has 3 kids. Her husband's a high school history teacher. She's a nurse. And her brother went to Ethiopia to adopt a baby. And she was so intrigued by Ethiopia and the way it was there, she felt called to go to Ethiopia and adopt a baby. So you can imagine her husband, her children said she was insane. Took her a year, but she finally did that. And she brought back a beautiful, little black baby. And going to Ethiopia actually changed her children's lives because they were spoiled and they didn't realize about, disease and famine and drinking water problems. So one day her baby was crawling in the grass and started drinking from a puddle. And she said, what am I doing? Taking this beautiful baby from Ethiopia and her mother into a culture where she's not familiar. What if Ava was 5 years old when I took her from Ethiopia? She would have all these memories of Ethiopia and then memories of America. So she decided to write a children's book about a child who's adopted around age 5 to come to America. So she wrote a children's book. She had no idea about what to do. There's a formula, and I'll pass this out. This is a book I wrote, which I self-published. There's a formula in here for a children's book. Okay, if you want to do a picture book, it's 32 pages, but you don't actually use 32 pages. You're actually using 24 pages of text. So I'll pass this around. If you want to take a picture of this with your cell phone, be my guest. I'll pass this around. She had no idea, so she wrote this manuscript. She's not really a writer, but it was very emotional. And I took her on because I loved the idea, and I knew it was so different. Don't write a children's book about an animal, okay? Out of your brain. They want children's books that are different, that teach a lesson, that are unusual. And the best way you can start learning about children's books is spend a great deal of time in bookstores and in libraries and go from one library to the next and just sit there and read and read and read and take down notes. I can't tell you the number of times I've met people that have written children's books and they're writing in a vacuum. They never read what's out there. They just think, oh, I have a great idea. And you might really have a great idea. But you know what? There are so many ideas that are rehashed over and over and over again. We don't need another big red dog. What we need is the little engine that could, or Good Night Moon. Something classic, something that they'll never forget. So anyway, this book, she came to me. I made her rewrite it 3 times. I made her do this, and I'll actually send you out my submission package. Her picture, her bio, a marketing plan. What is a marketing plan? How are you going to help your publisher sell your book? We'll go into that later. I made her do a website or a blog, which she did immediately. I made her do a PowerPoint on Ethiopia. And I said, Christine, do 20 screens. You have so many pictures of what it's like there, and the kids. Teach third and fifth graders, through this PowerPoint, and then you'll have permission to read your story. But I want letters from either the principal or the teacher about how great your story is, because that's going in the submission package. I make my authors do this, a YouTube video of them reading the beginning of their book. Research your competition, that's a whole other discussion. I make you make a summary of your books, like 20 books, comparing what's similar and what's different. Why? Why do I make you do that? Because when that package goes into the editor, we've essentially done the work for them. Okay, if you're writing a nonfiction book, let's say about vegetarian cookbook, Mexican vegetarian cookbook, well, you better have gone all through Amazon, books in print, Library of Congress, talk to library directors. There's so many different resources for you to go to. Publishers' catalogs are now online. I'm going to actually send around to you some catalogs so you can see how important the descriptions are in catalogs, which is really, if you want to write a great query letter, the best way to write a great query letter, start going on Random House, Simon & Schuster, St. Martin's Press, Macmillan, all those different major big publishers. Start reading, go type in catalog, and you'll start seeing their online catalog. Read the summaries of the book. They're written to pitch you and hook you. That's the best query letter. You can start to write like that, so it takes time to study that, doesn't it? You can't just whip it off. Don't be paranoid when you do your query letter that you're giving away your idea. Because a lot of these agencies, for example, let's say 9/11 just happened and 5 of you in the room had similar experiences, and you get upset because an agent takes your friend and not you, your book. You can't really protect the idea. You can only protect the execution. For example, if I give you a children's story that I have in my brain about unicorns coming from space and changing people's lives, and I give you all the characters, I give you the whole plot, the setting, everything, you could go home and write that children's book. But if I physically gave you, let's say, a 24-page picture book, and I gave you the text, and you took my text, and you didn't change it, and you put your name on it, and got it published, I can sue you, because it was what I wrote. I copyrighted it. We're going to talk about copyright because I was a director of contracts, copyrights, and permissions. The Library of the U.S. Copyright Office, it's $35. On my website, Jan Kardys, there's a link to it. You'll need Form TX, and you do it electronically. You finish your manuscript. You're going to mail it in. If you do it electronically, it's $35. If you mail it in, it's $85. It's a very simple form. It's the TX form. You can print it out. And that's protecting you. Why? In fact, there was a movie about this. Let's say you write a novel, and you go into a coma, and your best friend has your novel. And everyone expects you're going to die. Actually, there was a movie about this. And he steals it. But then you come out of the coma. That book, your book gets published under his name. Because you did the copyright certificate, now you can sue him and the publisher and get punitive damages. Now your question to me should be, what if I rewrite my book 10 times, but I copyrighted it in 1991? Don't worry about that, because when your publisher decides to publish your book, they're going to do the copyright certificate all over again. Okay? You can't mail your manuscript to you. If anyone told you that, that's incorrect. You have to do the certificate. okay? And for $35, you know, that's not a lot to worry about. I mean, when I did my book and I self-published it, in fact, it's in the back, I actually put in the TX form, which I'll pass around for you, so you could see how easy it is to fill out. And I physically mailed it in rather than do it electronically because I wanted it to appear in this book. So I didn't register my book until I printed it because I was taking a risk. No one could have seen this manuscript. And I wasn't really worried anyway. When you get a book deal, you're not going to have time. You're going to be too busy. If the editor decides they want to make some little changes here and there, you will not have time. And you will have a due date in your contract. And you have to deliver on that due date, or they could cancel you for non-delivery. Okay, so you got to pay it. You know, once you have a signed agreement, you can't sell your book to anyone else. You can't get out of it. You're locked in, rock solid. When you sign a book agreement, you give them the exclusive rights to print, publish, distribute in any form or media. So they can do a calendar if they want, unless your agent reserves merchandising rights. Agents should never give motion picture, TV, dramatic rights, or merchandising rights to a publisher. Those rights should be held back so they can be sold to the right parties. If an agent gives all rights for everything, they're not a good agent, unless you get a lot of money. Okay, so let me start this. Oh, competition. The first thing you do, you're going to write a novel, you're going to do a children's book, whatever it is, nonfiction. How many people are doing nonfiction? Okay, in the back of my book, there's information about a nonfiction book proposal. You have to do a book proposal. For nonfiction, and you're not going to like this when I tell you this, you have to get known before the book deal. Now, my son, who's very successful as an agent, I'll pass this around, I said, Mark, how many, you know, like if you're going to take on a nonfiction book, what kind of numbers are we talking about on social media? Or how famous does the person have to be? He said, Mom, if they don't have 1 million followers, I'm not interested. Now, don't be discouraged by that, and I'll tell you why. If you go on AARP magazine, guess what the circulation is of that magazine? 23 million. That's all you need. You write one article for the AARP magazine. It doesn't have to have anything to do with your book. Okay? Go on there, type AARP magazine submission guidelines, and they'll give you the topics they're interested in. I have somebody who's writing a book about being abused. She was a social worker, and she helped, when she was young, women and men that were physically and mentally abused. And that's what she did all day. But guess what happened? While she's doing this for a living, she's living with a man who is physically and mentally abusing her. So her story is like a rock and roll type of story. So she can't even write her book under her name because the man that she was involved with is still stalking her to this day. So she has to do something unusual. She has to be on Facebook, but not as herself. And LinkedIn. LinkedIn and Facebook are a great resource. LinkedIn, you can have 30,000 connections. How many people have a LinkedIn account? Okay, so what you should be doing in the search bar is typing in writer, and then author, and then you'll find some connections that you already have. Just go in number 2 and number 3, and every night while you're watching TV, send out invitations. I have 25,000 now. And the goal is you can have 30,000. Why it's valuable for you is once you have all these connections, you have people's email addresses, you can upload them into an email company like iContact, MailerLite, MailChimp. These are free up to a certain amount. So for example, when I started my conference in 2010, I grabbed all the emails from my submissions as an agent, from library events, and I used this image, which actually I own this image. I had an artist do this for me. There's a unicorn right there. I had the image and then a description of my conference. So people came from all over the United States just because of this email blast. So if you get your book done, see why you have to start doing this now? While you're writing your book, you have to start building up your social media. Because when your book comes out, and I see this every day on LinkedIn. Every day on LinkedIn I get announcements from writers. And they say, oh, my book just came out. Here's my LinkedIn account. Here's my Amazon account. Here's my Twitter account. Like, do I care? No. Have you told me anything about your book? No. You know what you should be doing? Showing me the cover of your book and the opening page. I have never seen that done yet. That's going to hook me. Why am I going to buy some book on vegetarian cooking when, number one, I don't know who you are, I don't know what your background is, but I might buy it if you have a beautiful cover and I start seeing the opening recipes. Do you see how you have to start thinking? You should be dreaming about this every night. And break the rules. So anyway, I'm going to pass this out. This was the first book I sold. Okay, Christine sent her query letter to 200 literary agents. Rejected by 200 agents. And every time she got a rejection letter, you know, her 5-year-old son would say, don't worry, Mom, someday you'll get an agent. So I put this together. I put together a notebook, and in the notebook I had various tabs. And the tabs were the manuscript, articles. I made her write an article for her local paper, her Bristol paper, Bristol, Connecticut, where she lives. I said, Christine, you went to Ethiopia. You have so many great pictures. The fact that you would adopt a child, you know, at your age, when you already have kids, and you have a really hectic job, you know, you did something quite extraordinary and different. And I want you to write an article about that. And she said, Jan, nobody's going to care about this. I said, let's just try. So guess what? She submits it with pictures. And guess what happened? They published it and changed 3 words. So every week I was giving her more stuff to do. I said, Christine, I want you to try right now to get a quote from a best-selling author or award-winning author. Guess who her best friend is? You know the book Eat, Pray, Love? Yes. She refused to ask her best friend for a quote.
Are you kidding?
No. So I said, Christine. She said, no, I can't do this. This is not right. So I said, fine. But she did get a quote from an award-winning author. So we put that in the submission package. We put the whole manuscript in. We put a book summary of the book, her competition, her website and blog, a marketing plan, how she was going to help the publisher and in what areas, her bio, picture and bio, and then the PowerPoint. Now, every week I was making her do new things, right? And she was always saying, I can't believe you're making me do this. You know, getting letters from schools where she went to the school and did her PowerPoint and read her story. And then I decided to do something different. When you submit as an agent a children's book, you only submit the text. You do not submit the art. That's breaking the rules. Because the book publisher will find their own artist. They have a whole art department, and they get tons of portfolios in. So they'll match the text to the artist they want. But in my journey at Scholastic, I negotiated a contract with an agent for an illustrator's agreement, and I really liked this woman, and I hired her to help me do some images for my website with her clients. She came to my house and I said, Bernadette, if I find any children's books I really love, will you give me 3 free pictures from one of your clients? And she said, well, if I love the story, yeah, I will. Now, she put in, so I said, and I'll include your portfolio. So Christine and I, the author, and Bernadette, went through, read the story. We all agreed that this woman would be perfect for Christine's book. So she put in all the different types of art, all the different, styles that this artist can do in color. And then we put in a list of all the publishers that have used this artist's work, and they're like 4 pages, and they're all major publishers from 1991 until 2000 whatever. So this is a heavy hitter. This is a woman who gets a lot of money for her children's books. We put this in, and then the reason why I did it is I wanted to start branding Christine. So she did business cards. We had this on the cover of the notebook. And I said, let's have a gift for the editors. Nobody ever gives editors gifts. No one appreciates how much work we have to do. And so she had been buying Ethiopian coffee beans. I said, could you put together some packages and we'll brand it? So everyone loved this. They loved these coffee beans. And then I have 2 more pictures in here. And, why we're putting this all together, Christine's shared her manuscript. Do you know who Rosemary Wells is?
Yeah.
She's a best-selling children's book author. She's older now. Christine sends her manuscript. Rosemary says, you're a sweet woman, but you're not a writer. I mean, it just ruined her ego. And then Christine said, well, my agent's getting an illustrator. And she said, well, she's not supposed to do that. She doesn't know what she's doing. She's breaking the rules. I knew exactly what I was doing. I was breaking the rules deliberately to make her stand out. And then, every week I'm saying, get your numbers higher on Facebook, on LinkedIn. And she's in her nursery school. And I haven't submitted her book yet. We're putting this whole notebook together. And I said, you know what, Christine, would be so great, and I'm going to pray that this happens, if you could get in the Hartford Courant, which is our leading paper. She said, well, Jan, that's never going to happen. I said, well, let's just wish for it, okay? So she's bitching about me to all of these mothers about what her agent's making her do. And guess what happened? There was a newspaper reporter who was eavesdropping, was picking up his 3-year-old daughter, and said, Christine, forgive me for eavesdropping, but could I interview for the Hartford Courant? Don't expect more than this much text. So guess what we got? A full page in the Hartford Courant. So this is Christine with her daughter, and there's a whole article about it. And then for some reason, the newspaper reporter wanted to interview me and interview a local bookstore who had read her unpublished manuscript. So I'm submitting now this book to all these publishers, 25 of them, people I've known, working forever in publishing. And there's one rejection after the other. And every rejection, Christine said, you know what, Jan? Let's give up now. Random House doesn't want it, Scholastic doesn't want it, let's quit. I've spent 1.5 years of my life. You don't get paid until you sell a book. Agents get 15%. I said, you know what? No, I'm not giving up. I said, after 200 publishers, yes, then I'll give up. But we're not giving up. Harry Potter, which you probably know, was rejected by Scholastic 4 times. So there's so many classic cases. You can't give up. You can never lose your enthusiasm and your passion. But if your manuscript's not in great shape, how can you be objective? You give it to your friends and family. They know so much about your novel that they can't really be objective anymore. So if you're writing a children's book, try it out on kids. Put yourself into situations, and kids are really brutal. They can really tell you what's wrong. So anyway, this went in, and I'm submitting it now to Walker Books. So after 8 months, Walker wrote me an email and said, Jan, sorry for taking so long. Would you be willing to let me work with your writer on spec? I almost fell off my chair. What that means is they don't like the way she wrote it. They don't like the structure of the story. But they loved the idea as much as I did. And so this editor, for 3 months, back and forth with Christine, we have no contract with Walker. I want this to be changed. I want this character to be more emotional. I want this topic. and the publisher approved it. So after 3 months, where we got free editorial advice, we signed a contract with Walker. And last year, Walker Books sold this book, and they changed the title. It was going to be Drinking from Puddles. They changed it, Thirst for Home. They sold it to Scholastic for book club rights. And you can't get anything better than that. So, in other words, you know, make sure your agent is really enthusiastic right from the beginning, you know, not just taking you on, because we have to spend so much time teaching you about marketing, how to use Facebook, you know, what Facebook groups you should join. You have to get known. So writing for a nonfiction author, if I'm going to take you on, I'm going to, like I have a cookbook author now, she's a food stylist. I'm making her write tons of magazine articles. I'm making her build up her blog. She has 500,000 followers. You know, a publisher's not going to invest money in you. Why should they? You know, just look at it logically. And I'll tell you why I know this from the inside. Being a director of contracts, I would do the contracts, or people in my department would. I knew the advance of all these books, right? I knew the royalty rates. Once the advance earns out, you start getting royalties. For example, let's say this book that the advance was $100. It would never be that low. But so you understand the formula. Let's pretend that the list price on this book is $10. For hardcover royalties, you get 10% of the list price on the first 5,000 copies sold, 12.5% on the next 5, and 15% thereafter. So if this book is $10 and the advance is $100, first of all, your agent's taking 15% of that $100. Once the advance earns out, how many books have to be sold to equal $100? 10, right? 10 books. The 11th book, you're going to get $1. Actually, not $1. Your agent's taking 15% of that. A lot of books never earn out their advance. What happens is a publisher is responsible for getting reviews in Library Journal, Kirkus, and Publishers Weekly. They're supposed to send it out to all these other magazines. It's very, very competitive. If you have a bad review in Publishers Weekly or Library Journal, do you think a bookstore or a library is going to take your book? No. That's why it's so important to have your first book be really, you know, perfect, you know, in really great shape. You have to do events. People have to, you know, a library event, going to bookstores. Now, if it's a bookstore event and you're doing a children's book, how many people are going to show up at a bookstore? 10, 5 people if you're lucky. So if you're really smart, this is what I have my clients do. I said, I want you to collect, you know, 10 other authors. For example, one of my clients is doing romance. She self-published all these really interesting romance and thrillers, and I'm making her rewrite all of her books. We're right in the editing stage. She's a master at marketing. She will do a tea in Newtown, Connecticut, with teacups and petit fours, and 150 women will show up, and there's a waiting list. Because you see, it's an event. Women like it. It's pretty. There's pretty tablecloths. So I said, you know what, Christine, while you're working on your book, you know, with Barbara, who's editing it, I said, I want you to go to Newtown Library, because I just discovered they have 3 huge bookcases of only Newtown authors. And I want you to put together an event, but you can't spend more than $10 of your money. And I want you to divide up. Each author can have their own little card table. The library has now donated their space for free. And I said, I want you to find catering companies. Big Y might donate. I got donation once for $25 from Big Y for an event I did. I said, people, you know, have wine, have food, have people selling crafts, whatever it is, so that you can pay for this. And then people divide up the duties. Somebody writes the press release. Get 50 Newtown authors. So she's really excited. And I have 3 other clients who live in Connecticut. And I said, you're going to help. You're going to help her. Diana Baxter, you're going to help her put together this event. Why do I want them to do this when their books are not even published and they're still editing them? Because those emails from those people, you want to become friends with at least 25 authors, really good authors, because when your book comes out, you want reviews put on Amazon. Reviews on Amazon are absolutely essential for you. So do you see how you won't have time once your book is done? Do you think you're going to have time to do a website, a blog, have high social media numbers? No, you won't. You have to have, you split your brain in half. Half the time you're writing and improving your writing, and the other half is you're figuring out, how am I going to market? The publisher's publicity department, I know this from experience with my son. He worked at St. Martin's Press during the summer for a couple months in publicity. And I would say, Mark, I also worked at St. Martin's at one time. And I said, Mark, how is it? He said, Mom, I don't know what they did without me. Because all day he would be taking books, packing them in envelopes with a letter about the book and mailing them out to all these different magazines and newspapers. When I did subrights, I had 300 titles a year to handle. I was one person. I had to go out to lunch every day with a magazine or a newspaper, and then when I got back to the office, I had to work on foreign rights, sending it to agents in each country. Do you think I could handle every single book, to send every single book out to every magazine I wanted to? No. Even coming in on the weekends, I couldn't do it. So when you're aware of that, that they don't have huge staffs, even with these big publishing houses, the subrights person has to really assess their whole list, wherever the catalog is, and sort of say, okay, these are the books I think I can sell, and these are the books that I don't think I can sell. Okay, so let me just go back to this presentation. I know you have a lot of questions.
I'm just curious.
Yes.
So what would you say, how long were these events, like a year she spent on having events in the tea, and you limited her to $10? What would you...
No, she hasn't done it yet.
Oh.
I'm making her do it. I'm making her put it together now.
But she had the tea.
She's had the tea. She's self-published all these romance books. She had a design store in Newtown. It's no longer in business, but she's a wild, dreamy, eccentric type of woman, and really beautiful, and a great marketer.
So she self-published, and she's a great marketer, but turned to you.
Her books need work. Her books need work. She's becoming a better writer because we're working with her. We're like a third of the way through. But she's been so good. She has a Facebook account, LinkedIn account, Goodreads, Twitter, Instagram. For example, I have, and you'll see it on this handout, I made this for you for a reason. It's a checklist, and it says start a LinkedIn account. Do one thing a week. Don't overwhelm yourself, okay? Like figure out LinkedIn. It's not that hard. You can write articles. And who do you want to connect with? Writers, authors, librarians, professors, English teachers, history teachers, CEOs of companies, anyone that would possibly be interested in your book. Just, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, Google+, Pinterest, Goodread. Goodread is a whole source, and I really have to get into Goodread. This is an excellent book for you to buy. Do you know about meetup groups? How many people know about meetup? Okay, so in Massachusetts, there's so many meetup groups for writers. Why should you join? Because once you join, you can find out who the members are, and then you do cross-marketing. You look for them on Facebook, you look for them on LinkedIn. You should be making an Excel spreadsheet every time you meet someone. Who's the person? What kind of book are they writing? What I do is I have on my desktop, LinkedIn message. And then I'll just say, hi, Jan Kardys, chairman of Unicorn Writers Conference, president of Unicorn for Writers, and Jan Kardys, and literary agent Blackhawk. And then I put my email address, submissions, Jan Kardys. You see how that works? So when I just, and I keep a low profile as an agent, if I just do LinkedIn alone, I get manuscripts from everybody, all over the world. You see how interesting you're going to find it? You'll meet some wonderful, interesting people. 2012, I met, I know you won't know this woman, Ann Nyberg. She's in Connecticut, Channel 8 News. No one would know her here. But one of my friends wrote her an email through LinkedIn and said, you know, I want to introduce you to my friend Jan. She's done this conference. 2012 will be our 3rd year. And she's an agent, but she's worked for 10 publishers. It's a really nice email. And I thought, well, no, she's not going to pay attention to me. Well, Ann Nyberg has her own company, Network Connecticut. Well, she'll help companies in Connecticut, whatever you're selling, or if she likes it, and then she'll put you on her website. So 2 days later, I met with her in Madison, Connecticut, and she interviewed me as if I was on the news, and she yelled at me. She said, "You have 2 friends on Facebook. What's wrong with you?" So she really gave me a lot of great ideas. Facebook, LinkedIn, all the social media sites, how to use them, how to promote the conference. You know, so the resources you will find on LinkedIn. You know, write a brief little e-message on Facebook when you connect with people. How do you get Facebook friends? Easy. You could do it in 4 days. You can have 5,000 friends on Facebook. You join groups for writers. Go on Google and type, what are the top meetup groups for writers? And then you join the group. And once you join the group, you have access to all these different writers. So my best advice is get 20 good friends that you are going to help each other. They don't have a good heart, don't waste your time with them. Because you're going to write a review for their book on Amazon, and they're going to write one for you. Competition, why do you have to do that? Does anyone know? Like, who's writing nonfiction?
They would probably want to know how you stand up against your
Yeah.
competitor.
Yeah. So, like the thriller author, David, I said, David, you have a lot of competition. Have you read all of these books? He said, yes. Well, how do you compare yourself? So he didn't really like doing it. I said, David, you have to do this. And with Christine, you know, she argued with me for 3 months. There's no book like my book. I said, no, wait a minute. Is there a book about another child from a different country that's, you know, adopted? So that's a similarity. So once you go on Amazon, Library of Congress, books in print, publishers' websites, you're going to start to see similarities. Even though your book is different, then go to several good library directors and tell them what you're trying to do. And in fact, I even did this in my book. I have a whole section on how to research your competition. What you want to do is you want to compare and contrast what's similar and what's different. You never want to say something negative about another book. You want to always be professional. But you're listing, here what you're doing, the title, the author, the publisher, the copyright date, the price, the ISBNs, the number of pages, number of illustrations, special features. So I'll pass this around again. This is she had 20 titles that we found. We could have found more, but we picked the books we thought were as close as we could get to her book, and she put this together. So anyway, here's an example of complete illustrated book of herbs. Writer's Digest, 2016, 1999, 400 pages, right? Here's the next book. Penguin Books, published a long time ago, 1984, $18, but 168 pages. Quite a difference, right? If you're going to write a book, a gardening book, a cookbook, unless you're known, you should be doing events. Start in your home. Start a meetup group. All of you could start your own meetup group. Okay? How many people are writing novels? No one wants to admit it. Okay. Well, you should be joining all the meetup groups in Massachusetts. It's very easy. In fact, that's one of my goals. I almost have it half done. Every meetup group in the entire United States for writers by state. Okay, so this is, you don't have to pay attention, you'll get this in your PowerPoint. These are some important sources. BEA, how many people know about Book Expo America? No one? Okay. Go online, it's called Book Expo America. It's about $100 a day. You can go for 3 days. You can't go the first day because you're not a librarian, you're not an agent, you're not a bookseller. But you can go, you know, the second and third day. It's in New York City. It's at the end of May. It's at the Javits Center. And why do you want to go to this? You will get so many free books. You bring a book bag, a suitcase. You have to park it there. They'll give you tons of these book bags, and you'll get books after books. You'll get promotional material, candy, pens. You will get so many books, best-selling authors' books, newly published books, that it will more than pay for you going to New York City. I go for 3 days, and I have a lot of energy. I'm exhausted. And it's like a zoo. It's a car show, but for books. But what's great about it is you're going to learn about marketing. You're going to come up with so many ideas, and then you'll get a sense. What is Knopf doing? What is Random House doing? What is Scholastic doing? There's a lot of different divisions of Scholastic. You'll really learn, and you'll get free catalogs. Some of them are still printing print catalogs. So that's what I do. I take 1 suitcase a day, and I get so many catalogs. And there are self-published authors there. They have their own little booth. Sometimes they get picked up by an agent. Agents go, foreign publishers go. That's where agents sell their foreign rights a lot of times at book expos. It's huge. It's absolutely a huge event, but you will learn so much. And you can take classes. You have to pay extra money. Does anyone have questions about Book Expo? It's called Book Expo America. Okay, so these are the magazines you should know about. I mentioned them earlier, but don't write them down because you're going to get this PowerPoint. These are the magazines. This is what I previously mentioned. Find writers groups, network with them, start really becoming friends. This is what I would do if I was writing a novel or a children's book. I would start to find people on LinkedIn or Facebook or in my meetup group that I wanted to become friends with. And I would say, you know what, if you would like to show me your children's book, I will be very honest and I will tell you what's wrong with it. But will you do me a favor? Will you read my children's book and tell me exactly what you think? In my meetup group, which I have once a month, I charge $10. I do it now in my home. It's easier for me. I limit it to 10 people. You bring your first 10 pages. You make enough copies for everyone. We go around the room. But the rule is, if you sit there and don't say anything, I kick you out. And if you're not kind and nice, I've kicked out 2 people because they were arrogant. And you have to really be honest. If you don't, and I make everybody write on those 10 pages their comments, and then we go around the room. And I said, you must be honest with these people. You must tell them how you feel and what you see is wrong. And they take this very, very seriously, and they work very hard at helping the writer. And you can do that in a very gentle way without destroying someone's ego. Because you know how sensitive you are about your book, right? You're very sensitive. So become friends with writers, help each other, go to events, study websites of published authors. Look at what they're doing on their website. Get poster boards and make a list. There's certain tabs you need on your website. What is it? About or bio, events, reviews, excerpts, books. You can't sell your books directly. Your publisher has to do that. You will get in trouble, but they will let you sort of sell books at events. And join groups. Read books on the craft of writing. I don't know if anyone buys them.
The library has one.
The library has them, but by the way, Writer's Digest books has a resource of books. sometimes I don't think they're really of great value because you could figure this all out if you really study someone else's novel. You start reading children's books and really study them. Do a storyboard. Michael Peach, when I worked at Warner Books in Little Brown, my son asked him once, Michael, he was the publisher of Little Brown, he said, how do you edit a book? You know what he said? He said, after I read the whole novel, I've already bought the book, I do a chart, and I do what happens in each chapter on these little cards. And then I put them on the wall, and then I step back, and I look at what's happening. You know, the rising action and the pace. And then he said, I can figure it out. It's like, really like doing a movie. When you watch a movie, I mean, I get so many ideas actually from watching movies. Because you still need that excitement, you need that tension, you need really good character development and great dialogue. That might help you. Everyone's different on how they write and put together their book. That's just one suggestion. Make sure you have at least 20 people reading your manuscript before you waste your time with an agent. Why? Because if you go to Curtis Brown, Laura Blake Peterson for your children's book, and you haven't had other people criticize it, and you really haven't studied children's books and why some get published, you know, you're going to be upset that you keep getting, 300 rejections in 3 months. So do your homework before you just randomly go out there and write a book.
The competition part, where you're
Yes.
doing and contrasting, is that included like in your whole submission, or
Well, agents will like that. You'll see on their submission guidelines. I'm more thorough. I don't say that. I don't think I say that in my submission guidelines about your competition. I don't say that. But I am going to ask for that if I take you on as a client. In fact, sometimes what I'll do is, let's say it's a nonfiction book that I'm sort of interested in. Like, for example, here's a book I'm going to be selling soon. It's called The Gift Within. She sent me this manuscript a year ago. And it's a collection of stories about psychics and mediums. And when it came to me, by email, as a query letter, I was very interested in it. The woman, her background is she does PR for a living. She's worked for all the major companies. She's worked for Danielle Steele, a few publishers, mostly drug companies. And anyway, she's always had this interest, and I find it interesting as well. I said, you know what, Marianne, I want a story on the history of psychics. Give me a chapter. And you know what? I want another chapter on the scientific research in psychics. And then I want another chapter on how do you use your intuitive gifts, your own natural instincts. How do you do that? It's actually really simple. You can find a book where, 300 pages that tell you how to do it. It could be said in maybe 5 sentences. That's how simple it is. So we edited this book. I said, you know what, I can't sell this book until I test out some of the psychics. And you don't know anything about my personal life. I want some free readings. Well, because really, I have to. I said, this is my reputation. I'm not going to go out and try to sell a book that I don't believe in. And it really blew my mind. Right now, I put her through doing a website, writing articles. She got published recently by 3 or 4 different magazines, online. She got herself into the New York Times recently, writing about, what's going on right now with sexual harassment. She got a letter published in the New York Times. She got mentioned. She called up the Wall Street Journal. She gave them an idea for an article, and then she was mentioned in the article, even though she wasn't interviewed. I have a whole list of things she has to do, because because this is nonfiction, she has to get known before the book deal. Right now, she's working with 2 best-selling New York Times authors who are in her genre who have written books about this field. You know, one's a psychic and one isn't. One's a scientist. And she's now going to be doing all the PR and marketing for them. You can imagine how helpful that will be. You know, and then I'll send this book out. I made her, this is not self-published. My approach is, after I send it out with a marketing plan, her picture and bio, I actually, because I did sub-rights, I said, at the end of each psychic's chapter, I said, you have some absolutely amazing information, little lessons, visions of what's going to happen in the world. I said, those are so perfect. They're like words of wisdom. I want you to pull them out, put them all together in one document, because that's golden and useful for somebody in sub-rights. You know, that's something that they could, even publicity could use that. So that's how you have to think when you do nonfiction. It's a lot of work. So unless you're famous, for example, my son told me this recently. He took on this guy. Guess who this guy is? He's not a writer. He has 3 girls. He's on Twitter. And he's a stay-at-home dad. And he's raising his girls as if they're boys. So he's writing all these funny things of what he's doing with his girls, and he goes on Twitter. He has 1 million followers, only on Twitter. So Mark found him on Twitter, contacted him. They came up with a great title for a book. And Mark made a 2-book deal. Do you see how it works today? It's ridiculous, isn't it? But, you know, I don't know what the advance is. I'm not going to ask him. That's confidential. But there's so many creative and different ways to get known if you do nonfiction. Fiction, you don't have to worry that much about that, but you should be writing articles.
Can you give us an idea of like what an advance would be, like what a range
Yes.
would be?
It
for
could
that,
be
or something like that?
anywhere from, like here's, by the way, I have some books that I think you should buy. The Essential Guide to Getting Your Book Published. This book could have gotten maybe 25 to 50,000. I don't know the advance on this book. Children's books, they start at $2,000 to $3,000. That's not a lot of money, right? But if your book does well, it's going to earn out. Like Christine's book, she does events all the time, all over the place. She's in all these organizations. She has teachers' organizations after her to speak, and sometimes she gets paid. She's into all these groups in Ethiopia. That's how, you know, and she doesn't really love it all the time, but it's helping to sell her book. She just submitted her 2nd manuscript to me. It's not a picture book. It's a YA novel, but it's in the same theme, and she found a co-writer. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. It's so different from anything out there. So I can't wait to, you know, start putting that whole package together. I talked about copyrights, permissions. If you're writing nonfiction and you use a lot of information from another book, you have to get permission. You can't use 1 line of music without getting permission. The Copyright Clearance Center has a lot of information about permissions if you need it. I don't think there's anybody in this room that needs permissions help, right? No. What are some of your questions? Do you have questions?
I have a question. I'm sorry.
No, please go ahead.
Okay.
If you have to get permission from an author to possibly make something into a screenplay, into a movie, that's a permission. I don't even know how to go about
and why would I want to do that with you?
Why would you want to
I
do
mean,
it?
if I wrote a book, why would I want to do that with you? What are your credits?
I've already written to the author, and
They might say yes. They might say yes.
yeah, I mean, I don't know if she's going to ultimately say yes. It's a project I haven't even begun. But I mean, I wouldn't know how to get the permission. I would have to. I mean, I have engaged in conversation with her.
You go to the author's agent. You contact the author directly through their website. The book publisher doesn't usually have motion picture and TV rights. The agent usually has to try to sell those rights, especially the big agencies. My son just, this is a while ago, he sold one of his books, Samantha Chase. She does romance, to Hallmark. And it was, I think it was called The Christmas Cottage. I don't know if anybody saw it, but I read the book. And I thought it was good. I didn't think it was great literature, but it's so commercial. It's
Right.
very, very commercial. So I was at Warner Books when we published Nicholas Sparks for the first time, The Notebook. I don't know if anyone's read The Notebook.
Yeah.
But, I mean, study the formula there. You know, study what you think works. It's a quirky business, why one book would sell and another would sell. Like, here's a funny story. My ex-husband has represented a lot of major hitters, you know, Ivana Trump, Janet Ivanovich, Dean Koontz, Tom Clancy was his first big book, but he has a lot of best-selling authors on his roster. And, you know, Tom started out, he sold his first book to Naval Institute Press without an agent. He had never written anything before, ever. And he wrote The Hunt for Red October, and he sold it to them. And Robert went to Book Expo, and he saw something called a galley. This is sort of like a galley. It's not the real book. And he begged Naval Institute Press for the book and said that he was a motion picture agent at William Morris. And they reluctantly let him read it overnight. He read the whole book. He found some things that they should change. It was their first novel that we're ever publishing. They actually took his advice, made Tom Clancy make the changes, and then he thought, oh, I'm going to get Tom Clancy as a client. And Tom said, what do I need you for? I already have a publisher. So then he went back to Naval Institute Press and said, you know what, William Morris is very big. You know, they're very big in motion picture and TV and literary. He said, you know what, you don't have experience selling paperback rights to a New York City publisher. Let me be your literary agent, Naval Institute Press. So he sold it for over $1 million. I don't even remember the advance. It was way over $1 million for Hunt for Red October. So Berkeley, Putnam Berkeley, published it in paperback. You know how the hardcover will come out a year later, the paperback will come out? Paperback was in the bookstore in the 11th month, even though the pub date was a day after the 12-month period. And Naval Institute Press was losing money because the paperback's cheaper. So that's how Robert finally got Tom Clancy, and he came up with many, many brilliant ideas for Tom on ancillary, you know, electronic rights, etc., games, everything. So he created an empire, really, for Tom Clancy. So I forgot what the point of that was, but what do agents do? Not only do we make a book deal, if there's problems with your cover, you don't like your cover, the agent has to call up the art director and the editor and say, you know what, could you give us another cover? You know, every time they do a new cover, that's $3,000 to $4,000 to $5,000 for a new cover. If you're not represented by an agent, we're going to take advantage of you. When I negotiated publishing agreements at Warner and Macmillan and other publishers, I always dealt with either publishing attorneys or agents. Occasionally I would deal with an author. I dealt with this author once who was from Canada. She did a book on astrology and that every person has a saint related to their astrological sign. It wasn't a huge advance. And she came in and she said, Jan, what changes should I ask for in a contract? And I said, if I told you I would be fired, you know, you have to figure it out, read the contract. It took us a week, 3 hours a day. It's probably the worst contract negotiation of my life because she asked the right questions, even though she wasn't an attorney and had no experience. You know, I've dealt with, you know, James Redfield, Nicholas Sparks, you know, Bill Gates, a lot of best-selling authors' contracts. So Sandra Brown, I've seen just about everything in putting together a deal. So these are things that are important. Your website, your blog. Do a guest blog. Start writing things on other blogs. That's another way of getting known. And what blogs do you want to be on? What are the top blogs for writers? You see how you're getting yourself known? Because you never know how it is people are going to find out about your book.
So back to blogs, right?
Yes.
Because I struggle with blogs, right?
Yeah.
So, what do you put in the blog? I mean, what is some
Okay,
good
well, for
top
example,
blog
you know what would be
topics?
fun? Your journey to find an agent, your journey to get published. For example, and I don't have it in front of me, but I have a Instagram account, which I started on Tips from the Horn. It's unicorn number 4 writers. And I take, because my theme is, obviously you can tell, the Renaissance, right? Everything I do is in that period. I love it. I have a Renaissance image, and then I say, copyright. Don't put the year when you submit your manuscript electronically to an agent. That's a giveaway. Just put copyright, so you circle in your name. So supposedly I was going to do this every month, every week. I've done 17 posts, and I have like 600 followers. Because every time I reject a manuscript, I attach this sheet. And obviously it says, join Instagram Unicorn for Writers. Once I do that, I start getting more and more followers. So what is that? That's called cross-marketing. So what would be fun? Maybe your journey with images. Or, for example, with David Solskin, he's a thriller novel. There's a scene in the book where at the end of the book, the man who kills his daughter and his wife, and he's going to become president. He owned this house, and the main character, Corey, who's Delta Force, Special Forces, buys this house, discovers a diary in the basement written by this daughter, 16-year-old daughter, who was sexually abused by her father. He goes on a mission to take down Stone, you know, the guy. And he almost gets killed, and his girlfriend gets kidnapped. So at the end of the book, there's these 2 stone statues, which, you know, the bad guy, the politician, plants in his garden. So I said, David, wouldn't that be so cool? Why don't you look for stone angels? We couldn't find 2 stone angels. He found one in a graveyard. So I said, I don't care how you do it. Any scene from your book, I want you on YouTube, and I want you to start reading the beginning of your book. So what does he do? He was a mayor in New Jersey. He's had a lot of interesting jobs. He's very good looking. He has dark sunglasses, a leather jacket, and then a hat on. And he's reading his book, and it's really interesting. And I said, okay, how many people even know about this? It's been out a month. Have you told all your friends? Have them go on YouTube and write, I can't wait to read this book. That's what you see? You do unusual things to get noticed.
How much of all this relates to if you self-publish a book?
You're going to do the same thing and more. The advantage of traditional publishing is you can't get your book in a library if you self-publish. Now, the exception would be if you're a bestseller, of course they'll want your book. Will you be able to get your book in a bookstore? Very unlikely. You can give them a free copy, you know, but they have to read it before they put it out on the shelf, especially if it's a children's book. Sub-rights, which is all those ancillary rights, you know, book club, audio rights, ebook rights, foreign rights, magazine rights. You don't have the contacts to sell it. Special sales and premium, what is that? Let's say you write a novel. Do you know Mystic Pizza? That's where I grew up, in Groton. Mystic Pizza, John, the owner. Let's say you have in your novel 3 scenes in Mystic Pizza. You go to John, you're self-published, and you say, John, look at, you're in 3 sections. Well, can I sell you 50 books? And, you know, that's how you're going to have to promote yourself. But if you have a book publisher, it's their job to take your book and find special markets. For example, when I worked at Google, I was in Authors at Google. And every month I would bring in 3 authors. When I went to Book Expo, this is the story to understand marketing. I brought my publishing resume, my business card from Google, and I said to them, how many people, these are the kind of authors we're bringing into Google. We're not paying airfare. the author can do a PowerPoint, will buy 2,000 books, non-returnable. I sent out my letter after I met these people, and I said, please start sending me books to be considered. How many publishers sent me books? This is Google that has endless money, right? And I said to them, if we're successful in, we're giving out these books for free during lunch, and the author's doing a presentation. If we're successful in New York, we recommend the author go to California, to Mountain View, where they could buy 5,000 to 10,000 books to give out for free. How many publishers sent me free books?
Zero.
One.
Oh.
One. You know what I had to do? I had to go to the bookstore and I had to find books that I wanted, that I thought Googlers would like. So do you know that book, 1001 Places to Go Before You Die?
Mhm.
I didn't know who this author was. I got the book. I wrote to the publisher. We bought 2,000 books, non-returnable, and I knew it was going to be so popular. I had a local bookstore come, and they had additional books. They were completely sold out. That's the way you're going to have to start thinking. When you do a library event or a bookstore event, just don't go by yourself. Go with other people. You know, make it more of an event where you can get more press and more attention. And you can all be working on Facebook. So for your answer to your question is, it could be your publishing journey. It could be you writing about wine. Like Jay McInerney, go look at his website. Guess how I discovered Jay McInerney? Does anyone know Jay McInerney's work? Anyway, he's a New York Times bestselling author, literary. One of his books is called The Good Life, Big City, Big Lights. It was a movie with Michael J. Fox. Anyway, he's published by Knopf, Random House. I was reading in an office one day in Architectural Digest, Jay McInerney's home. He's married to one of the Hirsch sisters, Ann Hirsch. So it's obviously a beautiful home, apartment. And I said, gee, I've never read his book. I went to Niantic, to the book barn in Connecticut. I got 5 of his books. I started reading them. Then I went on his website. I found out he was going to Darien Library, and I live in Reading, Connecticut. I went to meet him. I was the first person in line buying his book, and I said, Jay, I would love to have you come to Unicorn Writers Conference as my keynote speaker. So you see how the journey goes? You never know who you're going to meet.
Right.
There's little tiny websites and little tiny TV stations. I've been interviewed on 2 of them talking about authors. Why couldn't you get into a cable station where you could, I think you have to take courses in learning how to use the camera. You could start your own little TV show, you know, writers helping writers. I would go for it.